Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're destroying the Institute in Fallout 4, after deciding which group should help us in that endeavor. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. At the end of the last episode, we found ourselves arguing with the head of the Institute, Father, about the place of synths and the supposedly scientifically minded group in the wasteland. We'd learned through our exploration of the Institute that they were involved in some very messed up experiments in the Commonwealth, including killing and replacing the residents of the wasteland with synth doubles. This kind of activity not only goes against the stated goal of the Institute to advance human civilization through scientific discoveries, but it also actively hurts the relationship between them and the other groups and residents in the Commonwealth. The people of the wasteland are afraid. They're afraid of being taken in the night and having a replacement sent to live their life. They're afraid their loved ones could be replaced without them even knowing it. They're afraid that one day in the future, this mysterious force known far and wide as the Institute is going to come out of the shadows and take over the world they know, killing everyone and everything that doesn't bow to them. And a lot of that fear is warranted. Two major incidents in the game's history lend credence to the idea that the Institute doesn't have the best interest of the Commonwealth in mind. The first involves a rogue synth that wound up killing a bunch of people at the main hub in Diamond City. Everyone thought it was just some random guy who opened fire on the people in the area. But upon inspecting the corpse, they learned it was actually a synth that looked just like a person. The other big event involved the first attempt at something resembling a government in the Commonwealth. Several big players in the area, including the Institute, sent representatives to try and build a functioning group to govern the wasteland. But before anything could be signed or even agreed to, synth representatives started attacking, killing most of the other representatives and destroying any chance at peace in the wasteland. Along with all of that, they've released super mutants into the Commonwealth, making life even harder than it already was, and they seem to just generally be opposed to any kind of positive future for the people above ground. They think they are better than everyone else because they've been hidden away and have had the chance to make scientific advancements that no one else in the world has been able to achieve in the years since the bombs fell. This feeling of superiority isn't something that's specific to them, or even to the game world, but it is something that makes them more of a threat than a possible help. In the real world, we've seen groups like this pop up from time to time. They are typically convinced that they have the best methods and means to make the world a better place, with the definition of better place being contingent on their own ideals. We can look back at the colonial movement in countries like Britain, France, Germany, and others to see some good examples of this kind of thinking. The leaders of these countries would send out expeditions to various parts of the world, with the intention of not only exploring the planet, but also of spreading their own influence. They would often discover new groups of people in these endeavors, and they would either kill or capture them, with the eventual goal being to dominate the land. This was played off as being in the best interest of what were seen as hostile natives, and it was very often done for profit, using areas for their natural resources, crop conditions, or for other monetary gain. But money wasn't the only goal, as a lot of colonial missions were sent under a religious context. And religion is another example of groups using a superiority complex to try and lord over groups while pretending they have the best interest of those that they control in mind. Outside of colonialism, religious groups have spent centuries trying to convert non-believers through mission programs and even things like the Crusades starting in the 11th century. Every religion is convinced that they have the right answer about both how to live and what happens after we die. And most of them are interested in spreading that news around the world through various means. Some of this involves true believers, convinced they are saving lives and souls, and some of it involves greed by the leadership of different organizations, using religious conversion as a tool to grow their power and influence. There have also been smaller movements that aimed for more concise things than religious conversion or colonialism, like the Nazi movement in Germany in the 1930s. This movement, while technically aiming for world domination, was made up of individuals and groups that saw themselves as superior to others based on their genetics. It was born from the eugenics movement, a semi-popular movement that gained a lot of traction in the late 19th century before hitting its peak in the 1930s and 40s and slowly dying off after World War II. And that movement may have even been the inspiration for some of the ideals the Institute espouses. Their mantra, Mankind Redefined, is eerily reminiscent of the tone the eugenics movement sparked, with the goal of that ideology aiming to pick what proponents saw as the most desirable genes in the human population and focus on propagating those while simultaneously eradicating those seen as less desirable. And because of all of that, and how they see the people of the Commonwealth as expendable test subjects, the Institute has to go. We can't in good conscience side with them, at least not if we want to see the world of the wasteland improved in the long term. At least part of that falls on what I like to call the benevolent leader fallacy. This is the idea that even the most uncorruptible, perfect leadership will eventually be replaced by someone with bad intentions. It applies here because we know that the technology the Institute has would benefit the wasteland immensely in the right hands. With the right person leading the effort, we could see Boston rebuilt in a matter of years, and wind up with a flourishing society in a generation or two. But that tech would eventually come under the control of an individual that would abuse it, and we would wind up right back where we started. This isn't a problem inherent in the tech, and if done properly, it could actually wind up making the world of Fallout much better. It's more of an issue with the implementation. If the player character, or even Sean for that matter, could change centuries of ideology that the scientists of the Institute have been taught, they might have a chance to bring the tech and improvements to the world above. The problem is, people have a hard time changing, and even if you could get all of the scientists to begrudgingly go along, there would inevitably be an undercurrent of scientists working either actively or subconsciously to break the system from the inside. Little acts of sabotage would add up over time, convincing people that the whole plan was doomed to fail from the start. And eventually, you would have a lot of great tech going to waste or even being used to actively cause harm. Just look at the real world as an example. We have the technology to feed, house, and clothe everyone on Earth, but we choose to use a lot of that tech to kill each other or to actively bring harm in other ways. This doesn't mean that you stop trying to make the world better, though. It simply means that you have to find other ways to do it. So taking down the Institute will be in the best interest of everyone in the Commonwealth in the long term. But how exactly do we go about that? Well, the game gives us a few options, though we've already shot one down in this playthrough. I'll only briefly talk about that one, since we discussed the railroad in some depth in the last video, But Desdemona decided that because I didn't play by her rules and ask permission to go into the Institute, she didn't want to be allied with me anymore. The logic here doesn't make a lot of sense, because if I was going to betray the Railroad, I could have just as easily done that whether I talked to her before going or not. On top of that, the organization itself is rather twisted because it isn't just helping synths who've become sentient to find a path to freedom, it's also wiping their memories and giving them new identities. This action calls into question a number of things, not the least of which is whether the sentience they found before having their memories wiped still exists afterward. If you've got an identity, and have a personality and memories that make you unique, giving you what we know as sentience, would you still be sentient if all of that was wiped away, with fake memories and a false persona taking their place? Shouldn't the synths be embracing the fact that they are a synth and making their mark on the wasteland as a new life form? If super mutants can do it, why not synths? They are biological after all, and only distinguishable from humans thanks to a tiny component hooked into their brain. The Railroad may have good intentions, though I think a lot of that is more just because it makes them feel like they're doing something good, rather than them being there to actually do good. It's the difference between giving to charity because you want to have a positive impact, and doing it because you get a tax break. The action might still be good overall, but the execution and intention aren't necessarily there. So even if the Railroad hadn't railroaded us, I wouldn't want to partner with them in taking down the Institute because I don't think they're doing things that are actually in the best interest of the Commonwealth. Next up, we have the Brotherhood of Steel. These guys act as a kind of paramilitary force in the Commonwealth and beyond, having started out west and spread as they chase a dream of being a real army. They technically have a motto, Ad Victoriam, which means towards victory in Latin, but they might be better suited to adopt the phrase might makes right, as that seems to be a little more in line with how they approach pretty much everything. When we first meet the Brotherhood, it's through a small group holed up in the Cambridge police station, though we are technically supposed to get a glimpse of them and their massive ship, the Pridwin, right after killing Kellogg in the pursuit of Sean. Though, as I found out the hard way, this isn't the case if you don't do things right. I don't talk a lot in these videos about glitches and whatnot, but in this instance I have to call out the fact that Bethesda really screwed up here. See, after fighting Kellogg, I went back through Fort Hagen the long way, partly because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, and partly because I didn't see the exit that opened up after the fight. In doing so, I failed to trigger the arrival of the Pridwin, which didn't strike me as too odd at first because I just assumed that event was tied to meeting the Brotherhood members at the police station. That is not the case. To trigger the arrival of the ship, you have to exit Fort Hagen using the elevator on the bottom floor. This takes you to a door that only opens with a terminal, and hitting that terminal is the trigger for the Pridwin. That is really dumb, and that one little mistake almost cost me the chance to even go through the storyline for the Brotherhood of Steel. And that storyline is worth the effort because it really shows us who we're dealing with. There's a few different missions you can take part in, mainly focused on recovering artifacts and equipment and looking for materials that will help bring their giant robot, Optimus Prime, or Liberty Prime, back to life. Honestly, a lot of it leans into lore and things from previous games, and I didn't play those games, so the nostalgia of the situation doesn't really land for me. But there is one piece that I want to focus on. The first major member of the Brotherhood that you meet is Paladin Danse. Danse is one of those Brotherhood for life kind of people, and he would do anything up to and including giving his life if it meant saving the men and women that he fights alongside. He's also very interested in making sure others are taken care of, and he goes out of his way to bring the player character into the fold. Overall, he's just a fun character and one that I really like. But as we progress through the story, we find out that he isn't who we, or he, think he is. He's actually an Institute synth. This fact is discovered quite by accident when Proctor Quinlan decrypts the data that we recovered from the Institute, providing a list and description of their synths, one of which matches Paladin Danse down to the DNA. And just as a quick aside, that would make Paladin Danse technically our grandson, since Sean's DNA was used to create the Gen 3 synths. This isn't brought up at all, though I kind of wish it would have been. Where the Brotherhood goes off the rails is how quickly they move to eliminate the man that has spent years serving by their side. They don't take a minute to assess things, or to talk about how this finding doesn't actually make much of a difference given Dance's dedication to the cause. They just decide that because he was created in a lab instead of a womb, he isn't authorized to live. And that is just outright insane. Tracking Danse down, we find out he didn't even know he was a synth, meaning he's had his memory wiped on top of the fact that he was listed as being lost by the Institute, and reinforcing the fact that he isn't some spy or someone to fear. He is a dedicated Brotherhood of Steel soldier, and they are willing to throw him to the dogs because of some misplaced idea that all technology is evil. And that's something that really just rubs me the wrong way about this group overall. They spend an inordinate amount of time combing the wasteland for technical documents and technology that they deem as too dangerous to be in the hands of others, hoarding that tech and pretending that they are somehow above everyone else. They seem to be laboring under the impression that their little paramilitary group is immune from corruption, and that they are the only ones responsible enough to hold on to the high-tech gear they find for the time being. And this philosophy is no different in many ways from the Institute, with the main difference being that the Institute operates mainly in the shadows, while the Brotherhood lords their technological superiority over the people they are conquering. The one saving grace, at least for this particular group of Brotherhood acolytes, is that their leader, Elder Maxon, at least has a good enough head on his shoulders to listen to me when I tell him off for being a nitwit about Paladin Danse. But there's one part of the discussion I had with him as he tried to argue his point that I want to hone in on. He states that the ethics Danse is trying to champion aren't even his own, that they were programmed into him. And to that I say, yeah, just like every other member of the Brotherhood of Steel. Well, I would say that if the game gave me the option. See, the Brotherhood, like just about every other religious, military, and social organization in existence, has a code of ethics that they live by. This code is drilled into every member from the time they are born, or join up in some cases, meaning it is more or less programmed into them, just in a less technical way than Maxon is referring to here. None of us are born with ethics or morals of any kind. We learn what to do and how to act from other members of our group as we develop through childhood and into adolescence. Those morals and ethics can change over time as well, both for individuals and societies, and are always being updated based on what we find acceptable within the confines of our slice of the world. Maxon's biggest concern here is likely really that he doesn't know if there is some program inside Danse that will switch on at some point, changing his ethics and making him an enemy of the Brotherhood. But that's true of literally any member of the group. People change their minds all the time, and we see individuals and groups even changing what they see as morally or ethically acceptable as often as week to week in some cases. So what's stopping any other member of the group from becoming a threat? There's no higher risk of Danse taking out the Pridwin than there is for the player character or anyone else doing it. And to answer the question I just raised in your mind, no, I haven't taken out the Brotherhood of Steel in this playthrough. I've also left the Railroad intact because I think it's just ludicrous that you're tasked with taking out all but one of the three main factions, and I refuse to take part in the idiocy that is Bethesda's writing department. But I digress. So the Railroad and Brotherhood are out of the running. Who does that leave? If you've been watching my channel for any period of time, you probably guessed ahead of time who I would be bringing to the party here. Preston, Garvey, and the Minutemen. The Minutemen want nothing more than to see the Commonwealth made whole. To have the fear and doubt the Institute has been sowing removed from the world, and to make tomorrow better than today. They're also the only group that I can lead while simultaneously making a positive impact through things like building and maintaining settlements, where wastelanders can find hope and improve the Commonwealth together. After a wild battle at the castle, where we probably lost a lot of good fighters as we held off the best punch the Institute could throw, I met up with Sturgis, who'd managed to find a back door into the Institute through the plans that we procured earlier, and we made our way into the Bastion of Science one last time. The journey consisted mostly of climbing through pipes and totally safe for human consumption water, and after a couple of hairy fights with ghouls and synths, I found myself pressing the button that would bring my Minutemen army to my side. As they came piling into the room, I found myself swelling with pride and... Oh, for God's sake, Garvey, are you kidding me?
I cleared out the ghouls that were giving that settlement trouble.
Glad to hear it, General. It's hard enough out here without people having to worry about ghouls in their backyard. Got another thing to talk to you about. Got a strange message from a robot. Said it was from some place called Grey Garden. I couldn't figure out exactly what it wanted, but, well, may as well check it out. You never know. Hey.
What's up?
What do you need, General?
Okay, so apparently there's a glitch with this mission that revolves around our buddy Preston and his obsession with sending us to random settlements. If you have any quests with him that you have cleared but not yet turned in, he'll completely forget what you're supposed to be doing and lock up. My first thought was, okay, I'll just reload a recent save and clear the quest before coming in. Now, when was my last save? Well, since the game auto-saves every time I go into a new area, those won't work, as they don't take me back out of the Institute. And my last hard save was 2 hours ago? Before I recovered the synth for Father, stabbed him in the back, saved the castle, and infiltrated this stupid stronghold? Shit. I tried console commands to advance the mission, but that didn't work either. So?
You know I'd only let you down. I say you don't know what you're doing. I wonder why you come around when you see this storm is brewing. Was it a lover, or was it a dream? Or was it something more than what it seemed? I'll just sit about here in between.
After making sure to clear my mission with Garvey, I teleported his ass back into the Institute and prayed as hard as I could that one of the courser's shots would hit him square in the face as we fought our way through the underground facility. Of course, I couldn't get that lucky, but I did manage to finally get to the bedside of my dying son, Father Sean. It does seem rather convenient that he's dying right as we're storming his home, but then it also makes some sense. It's pretty obvious here that he found out he had some disease that even the Institute couldn't cure, and decided that his dying wish was to watch his father die as well by having us released from the cryo chamber. I say that because if he'd wanted to meet us, he could have sent his lapdog Kellogg, or perhaps someone a little less antagonistic, to greet us and bring us straight to the Institute. I mean, why would he risk us dying in the wasteland if he really wanted to reconnect? And why wait all that time to do it? He could have sent for us at any point after he became the head of the Institute, but he waited until he was nearly on his deathbed to do it. One thing we can do here is convince him to show some semblance of mercy for once in his life and provide us with the code to shut down the remaining synth guards and issue the evacuation order. This isn't much, but it does help us complete our mission and get out of there while sparing as many lives as possible. On the way out the door, however, we find Father Sean's last little twist in the form of a synth version of 10-year-old him. The child has been reprogrammed to not only not know it's a synth, but to also recognize us as its parent, and that's just so messed up. Ethically speaking, if we see the synth child as sentient and value sentient life, then we have to take him with us. He's likely just the result of some really advanced programming, but we don't really have the time or means to figure out how much of him is programming versus how much is genuine. So I choose to send him off to the castle to await my return before heading up to the top of the tallest tower in Boston to finish the mission. Thankfully, Preston didn't waste my time with another call for help from a nearby settlement as he explained how the detonator worked. And with the flip of a switch and an explosion that probably killed or at least shocked some unwary citizens in the Commonwealth, the main story comes to an end. Obviously, it's kind of a sad ending, as we weren't really able to save Sean. But it also starts us on a new path to build a life in this world we now call home. Even without the Institute, there's still plenty of threats out there, and next week we'll be meeting the first of those in the form of a villain known as the Mechanist. Their robots have been harassing the wasteland, and we've already run into a few groups of them as we fought our way around. But the real monster lies in the details that we'll be unearthing as we work alongside a quirky bot named Ada to save the Commonwealth yet again. You can help me defend the citizens of the wasteland by hitting that like button and subscribing to Lost in Games on YouTube. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on which group you think is the best one to take down the Institute, or if you think the Institute was actually the group I should have picked to keep around in the comments below. You can also help me expand and defend settlements by joining as a channel member or patron. Both of those things help me get new games to cover in the Philosophy and Ethics series, and help me keep the channel running, while granting cool perks like getting your name on the screen and early access to videos. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.